tonight, I'll be demonstrating how to make this minimal wallet. The idea for the wallet is not mine, but I did teach myself how to make it. So I'll give you all the measurements so you can do it yourself. This side is 4.25 inches. This side is 2 inches. They are parallel. The long side is 14.25 inches. This top side is 6 inches. This side is 3 inches, and these are all parallel. This side is 3 inches, and this one is 3.25 inches. This angle is approximately 165 degrees, and this one is 155 degrees. The way that you can make this pattern on your own, though, is just cutting out a piece of paper that's this size and shape, and then folding it and measuring to make sure that you can still fit cards in it. Because that's how I did this pattern, and you can do the same way yourself. So these angles can be adjusted, and even some of these, the diagonal lengths can be adjusted too. The 3 inches is kind of and the 6 inches are kind of credit card widths, so that's how those get determined. But the angles and these diagonal lengths could be different depending on what you want. And I've made a cardboard model of mine so that I can trace and cut out from it. So this is what I'll be using. So I got my piece of leather here. This is a vegetable tanned leather. That's how it got this color. It's about 3 to 4 ounces. It's a pretty thin weight. It's really flexible. And it'll eventually, after a couple months of use and hand oil, be about this shade. So it changes a bit. So I'm going to be, since I want my front pocket to be slanted this way, I have to make sure that I orient the front side of the leather with this angle facing the right way, because when I flip the leather over to put the stencil on it and trace it, I need to make sure that I retain the same orientation. So it'll be like this. And I'm going to go ahead and trace in pencil because I can make the marks in pencil on this leather, which is helpful. And because this leather is pretty thin, I'm going to be able to cut it with scissors. But if you're working with thicker leather, you would need to cut with an X-Acto knife probably on a cutting mat with a curved blade. The curved blade keeps the leather from bunching up, especially the thinner the leather. But since I don't need to do that because this leather is so thin, so I'll just go around and cut this leather out. You do have to make sure that you keep your sides pretty straight, because that's how the pattern will come together and look neat and be all aligned. So now I've got the piece pretty good. So this pattern is pretty self-explanatory. You'll just need to fold along the obvious edges here. Looking pretty good already. You want to make sure that you get these edges to line up. Looks pretty good. So the easiest way to do this, before you stitch, you have to glue. Normally you would glue and stitch pretty much everywhere on a pattern. It just helps everything stay together for longer. It's more durable that way. So on this particular one, it is actually easier to glue it and then stitch it. That way all the layers stay in place while you're stitching and you don't get misregistering holes. So line up all the bottoms here. Looks pretty good. So I have these small C-clamps. They're rubber. with the rubber tips, that way they don't damage the leather. So I'm just going to clamp this in place for now while I get the glue ready. And I will also be using these clamps to hold the piece in place while it is drying. So I'll just leave that there. I'm using water-based contact cement, which is leather. It's meant for leather. Because I'm so bad at washing brushes after I use them and I end up just ruining them, I will use a cotton swab to apply the glue on this piece. That way I can just throw it away. So you want to apply the cement on both halves, and then once you let it dry, and then you're going to want to adhere them together. That's how the contact cement works. But if you have a different kind, then just follow directions. Apply along both of the bottom edges here. It's almost dry. These clamps back on, let that dry. Just tight enough so that it keeps together. And while it's drying, we're going to set up the needle that we'll use to stitch with. We're going to need 2 of these saddle stitching needles. This is a natural linen waxed thread. The waxed part is important because it allows you to not necessarily have to make knots, because you can join the ends of threads just by a little bit of heat as the wax melts. It also is waterproof, stronger, and you're going to need that. So the one end of your thread, you're going to need a thread that's about twice as long as, a little over twice as long just to be safe, as what you're sewing. And we're going to be making a seam that goes down both bottom edges of this. So we're going to need it's better to have too much thread than too little, so cut more than you think you're going to need. And put it on both ends of the thread. So you've got a loop like so. And set that aside. So this just needs a little while to dry. It just needs to be dry enough for us to punch holes in it. I'm also going to put a little glue on the inside. You'll notice that earlier I only did it on the top 2 layers, but it'll be helpful also if there's glue on that inside layer, the very center. But not too far in, because you don't want to prevent credit cards and cash from going all the way to the bottom. A little bit of water will get that off. take just another minute to let that get set up, and then I'm going to punch the holes for sewing. So leather is too thick, and especially 5 layers is too thick to sew by hand. So some people use an awl, a sewing awl, to put one hole in at a time. But I'm going to be using a diamond tooth prong tool to set multiple holes at once, and a rubber mallet to punch the holes. Alright. That's pretty good. So we're going to be putting holes along this bottom edge and also along this side edge. Now I'm going to start in the corner. That way I can get pretty good registration mark, about equidistant from the far right edge and equidistant from the top edge. I'm going to set that, make a small indent so I know where the holes are, and then with one hit, maybe just a few hits, try to get all the holes in there. Once you begin to see the holes in the back, you know you've almost gone through, so you want to make sure that you get all the way through. There we go. And you'll just have to pull that out. There's the holes. We're going to overlap by a couple holes just so we can get the spacing right, and also because that's the amount of holes. We don't need any more holes than that, so I'm going to put some more holes in. Also because it absorbs some of the impact. So we're going to use this corner hole again just to register where we want to put our next set of holes. Make a straight line about right there, and then all of our holes are set now. So especially if you're going to do this by hand, it helps to have a surface to put the needle against. So put one needle through the first hole, pull it all the way through so that your thread is about equidistant. And then you're going to make another loop through the same hole. There's different techniques to sewing. This is just one of them. This is just the way that I want to do it. So you'll have a loop on the very end like that. And then this is a saddle stitch. So you're going to go through every hole twice. You're going to come in once from the front and then from the same hole from the back. Once I get a few stitches in, it'll be pretty obvious. You're going to pull tightly between each stitch. Through the front again. Through the back. You can see now why you would need 2 needles for this. Pull a stitch in again. From the front. So you can see how in every hole there's a stitch between every set of holes. It's called the saddle stitch, and we're just going to go all the way around like this. nearly at the end of the second side, so we'll put the normal last stitch in. I like to end mine the same way I start them, so I'll do one loop from the back to the front again, just to make this look like this, and then I'll send this front thread to the back again by putting it through the second to last hole. And then here in the back, take both needles off, and I'll tie a small knot, even though you don't really need to. I'm going to tie a square knot. I'm going to tie one, tie both ways so it doesn't come undone. And then I'm going to clip these threads right after that hole, right behind it, because this knot is not going to come undone. Especially if you apply a little bit of heat and just smooth it out a little bit, hardly even notice it. So after a couple of days of wear, this will be all broken in. It's a nice minimal wallet. Can be a little snug at first, but that's how you want it because it'll break in. There you go.